Hey guys, Graham Johnson from Tabletop Glory here, and as you can see, we're going to be painting the Millennium Falcon today. Now, there are a few little minor details that need to be taken care of. However, it was requested that I do a full video on just painting the cockpit. Basically, they wanted me to do as little edits and as little cutaways as possible and to pretty much show everything. And to do that, it's pretty much going to take up its whole own video. So I'm gonna do that, as well as all the final little accessories that you can see either missing from this model or quite clearly unpainted, and we're gonna put all those together for next week's video. And for this week's video, we're just gonna kind of go over the basics of how I painted this, and we're gonna really kind of go more in depth on the weathering process. Now, most of the weathering can be done with an airbrush. However, unfortunately, my airbrush has decided to die on me. My pump is not acting properly and I'm not getting anywhere near enough air pressure. Hopefully this weekend I can set some time aside, pull it all apart, and see what's going on. And if I'm lucky, it'll be okay. More than likely, it's going to need to be replaced, and with me in between jobs right now, it's probably not going to get replaced anytime soon. So unfortunately, that means the next few videos are probably going to be a lot of hand painting and a lot of traditional modeling, and we're not going to really be able to use the airbrush, so I do apologize. In any case, enough babbling, let's get on to the video. Now, real quick before I get into what we're doing here on screen, I just need to let you guys know that some footage was lost. Unfortunately, it seems that Apple decided to have an update, and since I use my phone to record these videos, some things basically got lost in the cloud server, and although they're there and I can watch them, there is no way to download them, and even Apple admitted that they don't know what happened. Apparently, I'm not the only person this happened to, and it just sucks. They're working on a solution, but obviously this week's video had to go out, so you're not going to get any footage of me putting it together. And unfortunately, the first pass of me putting on the blue-gray hull panels, they kind of got lost, and as well as me kind of smoothing out surfaces in certain places to add and remove textures, that got lost as well. As you can see, my airbrush is really choking here. It is just kind of spitting the paint out. It's not really doing what I need it to, and the paint's not really adhering quite well. It's just kind of wiping off. Now, this was because of how much I had to thin down the paint just to even get it to go through the airbrush. It was really not a good situation. You don't want to thin your paints down as much as I was having to do just to get this to work. Right now, I'm just kind of laying out all of the dark gray panels as well as the brick red, rust red panels. Those are kind of a staple of the Millennium Falcon. They're all the little areas where Han Solo and Chewbacca have kind of patched up the Falcon and fixed certain things, and really gives it its iconic look by the time we get to see it in the original trilogy. So this pinky purple fluid, I don't think I've ever really shown anything like this before on the channel. This is a masking fluid for acrylic paints. It's really cool to use. It does stick in any kind of little gap that's left in your model, and you will be picking little pieces out for a few days afterward. But it peels off almost like you're peeling a band-aid off. It comes off super clean, and it gives you some relatively smooth lines as long as you're really patient in the application process. Again, this is just some of that footage we lost. I wish I could have shown putting it on, but I will definitely be using it in future videos, so keep an eye out for that. And I will try to also make sure that there is an Amazon affiliate link for that in the description below if you want to check it out for yourself, because this stuff is awesome. Cleaning up the overspray is super simple. I've just got a cotton bud here, and I've actually just got some airbrush thinner in the cotton bud. You could use rubbing alcohol, and I do end up using rubbing alcohol in other places to get more exaggerated effects. But just understand that rubbing alcohol is going to remove any paint that doesn't have some kind of sealant on top of it. So if you get the model to a point where you like it and you want to start doing more weathering in addition to that, but you want to basically make yourself a little save point, you can go ahead and coat the whole model in a dull coat. I recommend Tester's dull coat, and you can just coat the whole model in that, give it maybe 2 or 3 thin coats of that, and then you can start weathering on top of the dull coat again, and that kind of acts like a save point. So if you end up having to scrub a little bit, you don't accidentally go through the layers and take off some of your hard work underneath. Next, while the paint is still a little bit wet, we can also go in with a toothpick, and the reason we're using a toothpick is it's not super hard. If you won't use your X-Acto knife, you might cut into the plastic, but with a toothpick, we can kind of lightly score the edges. We can go into any kind of panel lines or anything and really groove out things and make sure that things are nice and tight, as well as add all these little surface scratches and things to really make these panels look old and to make the paint look a little bit beat up. Now you could totally use something like chipping fluid for this, but I wasn't trying to reveal any crazy colors underneath, and the plastic is actually molded in a very similar color to what I ended up spraying the whole model in anyway, which was basically like Dawnstone Gray from Games Workshop, so I really wasn't super worried about it. You will see in a few places where I actually scrub a little too hard, and I do go back down to the original gray plastic, which is brighter than Dawnstone, and once we start adding a lot more weathering to it, that becomes a bigger and bigger problem, accidentally scrubbing down into that base layer of plastic. However, I do have a trick for fixing that, so if you make a similar mistake, you can follow along at home and do the same fixes I'll be doing toward the end of the project. Now, one of the big complaints we were getting last year is that sometimes I have the tendency of explaining something once through and then not really showing enough of the process for it to make sense for some people. So I actually recorded quite a large amount of this process. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but I am going to put the video in high speed. I'm going to set it to 4 times speed, and then I'm going to show bits and clips of me removing this film and doing all the little toothpick scratches and everything else, and then we'll cut back when we're ready for the next step of weathering. I want to take a second to show off the real stars of this project, as the paint does a good job, but the weathering pigments all kind of bring everything together. So I'm not going to stick around on the paint too much. Just understand that you can just kind of color match with what you have because the brand's not super important. Now, when it comes to the Tamiya panel liner, if you don't already have a bottle of this, I'm sorry, I end up using it quite a lot. You could use a product such as Nuln Oil or to make some kind of a black glaze and use that in its place. However, in my personal opinion, this actually works phenomenally well for what it is. A lot of people will say that panel liner is basically just an oil wash. It's honestly not. The products do work very similarly. However, with a panel line, you have way more control over this product, and I highly recommend you pick some up. It does come in a variety of colors, but the 3 that I use the most are brown, black, and gray. And in this project, I'm only going to be using the brown and the black. Now I'm going to be foregoing the little brush that comes in here for a hot minute. I am going to use it later when I actually use it as real panel liner, but right now I'm actually going to be using it as a glaze because I love the way that it works both as a glaze and a wash at the exact same time. It settles into the recesses and it tints everything, and it gives it this nice all over gray. It's really great for engine compartments, any kind of grimy gritty situations that you kind of want to create. So these little open engine bay compartments that are both on the top and the bottom of the spacecraft, this is a really great place to just kind of goop it in. Now if you end up going a little bit over and you end up making some kind of a mess or a little bit of a spill, that's okay. You'll see here I do that in just a second and I wipe it away with my finger. Now I'm not trying to scrub it clean, I'm just trying to keep it toward all of those details, and I'm trying to keep most of it off of the flat surfaces, but I'm also pulling down and away toward the outside of the saucer. And what that's going to do is, as we continue to build up our weathering by doing that, by pulling down and away toward the edge of the saucer, that's going to give the illusion that maybe water or rain or dust or particles or anything else that has impacted this ship in any kind of way has worked its way down and off the side of the ship. And we're going to do the same thing on the underbelly, and it's going to give it this really awesome appearance. Now real quick here, I am going to show you a small picture of the Millennium Falcon. This is one of the original filming models. I'm not sure exactly which one it is. However, I can only show a small section. I can't show the whole thing simply because I do not own the copyright, so I can only show you directly what I am referencing for this part of the tutorial. You can see this streaky nature that's kind of running down the sides of these panels that kind of give this illusion that some of these markings are older than others, but in any case, whether it be because it's being washed or what it's being exposed to, that things are getting pulled down and away from the center of the Millennium Falcon. Now, something to keep in mind is this is one of the original filming models, and because of that, the white plastic has yellowed with age, which is why things look more of a khaki color, whereas my model looks more like what you think of when you think of the color spaceship gray or concrete gray. That's why mine is so much brighter than the original filming model. It's because I'm not trying to mimic what the filming model looks like now. I'm trying to mimic like what it looked like when it was built and when it would have been filmed with in the studio. Now I'm using Dune Bull Brown, but you could use any kind of brown that you want. So what you're going to want to do is make sure that it's a dark color, and we're going to do these very light, etchy, almost not even, almost borderline dry brush highlights along the edges of some of these panels. So anywhere where we have these nice big open gray spaces, we're doing this simply because it's going to kind of help to look like the paint is chipping, but we've also got some rust kind of happening. And in a few places you may even want to take your finger and smear the paint down a little bit to add some realistic streaks and that sort of thing. This is just to kind of help break up the panels and to add some variety before we start adding all our pigments later. Now I'm also going to be doing this on the edges of some of the more notable panels, like around the main guns on both the top and the bottom. You'll see that little saucer in the middle. I end up adding quite a bit of brown around the outside edge of it. But we're going to be taking some of our panel liner brown and we're going to be adding it into places where it seems like moisture would be captured. Basically anywhere where like a lot of the pipes would meet up. There may be some areas where moisture isn't going to quite drain out properly, especially a lot of those surface pipes. There's a lot of little nooks and crannies where water may get captured and that could cause some corrosion. So we're going to be adding some of this brown panel liner because as it dries and then when we mix it with some other products later, it really does a good job at looking like brown rust, especially in this scale, which is one of the other reasons why I'm adding it so heavily into all those little engine compartments again as well. On top of that black, it looks really awesome. One of the biggest places that I end up adding this brown wash in is in all these little nooks and crannies along the major panel lines, all these major body segments. I go ahead and add that brown wash in. Those are places where I think water channels would be happening. This is places where large amounts of water are collecting and running down the surface of the ship all in one spot, creating this constant flow of rust that the crew is just having to constantly deal with. These are places where you're just going to get mud and dirt and all kinds of nastiness, where you're just going to constantly have some kind of earthy tones and earthy colors happening pretty much all the time. And you can go in and you can kind of blend things out and use your finger, use a Q-tip, do whatever it is that you want to do to kind of blend these colors together. But you want to make sure that all these major body panels end up with some of that brown. And now I've changed to the bottom of the ship. We're doing the same thing again with these armor panels, picking out these big ones and going ahead and adding in this brown wash. Now I am being thicker on the bottom, but also what's of note is that the water is collecting toward the saucer in the middle, that disc where the gun is, as opposed to moving away toward the edge of the main saucer. So that's because the water is going to run down off the top, drip onto those panels on the bottom, and then drip all the way down toward where the main gun emplacement is on the bottom. So it's important to keep that in mind so that when working on the bottom, our thickest line should be near the gun, but when working on the top, the thickest line should be near the edge of the outside saucer. Bit confusing, but that's what we need to keep in mind when weathering. Anytime we're doing streaks, we want to pull our streaks away when working on the top and push our streaks in toward the middle on the bottom. Now you can pull them out a little bit, but you don't want to feather them too much. You want your streaks mostly going in toward the middle on the bottom and going away from the middle on the top. So real similar to before, you guys want to see my process, so I'm going to go ahead and show you my process. And we're going to come back in a bit when it's time to panel line all of these actual little panel lines, all these little nooks and crannies. We're going to do those in black, but I'm going to go ahead and play this footage at 4 times its original speed so you can kind of see what I'm doing, see where I'm picking out all my browns and everything else, and you get a good idea for how I'm thinking about where my rust needs to end up. So this one's pretty straightforward. We're just doing some black panel lining, and we're just going in with the actual brush that's a part of the bottle. And I'm just touching the tip of it into each of these nooks and crannies, and as you can see, the capillary action, never say that word properly, the capillary action, which is the basically fancy way of saying the surface tension of this product seeps into all the cracks really easily and basically fills that void with this pigment. Now you'll notice that it does kind of leach out a little bit and stain the surface. If you stay on top of it and give it just a tiny little bit of a chance to dry, you can come in with a Q-tip with just a tiny bit of rubbing alcohol, nothing crazy, and just do very light scrubbing and you can get it off. Now I know it looks like I'm being quite abrasive here, but I'm actually scrubbing quite lightly, and I'm just doing multiple passes so that I can clean that up. Now you can leave a little bit of staining in some places, that's fine, but you don't want to do that all over because the model ends up looking really dirty if you do that. So try to keep most of it into the cracks and around any of these little raised detail bits. You can see I'm leaving a little bit of staining around those just to help them get picked out in a crowd. When you just look at the model, you can just see it right away. And then I'm also going to go ahead and be putting that into all of these little vents as well. It's going to do a really great job at helping to make it look as though it's got more depth to it than it actually does. And then once again, I'm just going to leave you with the rest of this footage so you can kind of get an idea of how I apply it and clean it up. Now obviously we've skipped forward a little bit. Doing all of the black lining for this ship took about 4.5–5 hours. That's all of the pieces, top and bottom, and all of the accessories. It's quite a lot, and this isn't just the last time we'll be using this product either. We're going to use it a little bit in the weathering process here soon as well, in addition to our dry pigments. You can see I'm kind of smearing it on the surface in places and then using a clean Q-tip to take it away and create more of those streaks and smudges that we talked about earlier on in the video, as well as adding a little bit of depth to all of the pipes. So I originally wanted to add a lot of little blaster marks here and there, but I'd never really done something like this before, so I wasn't really 100% sure how good they were going to turn out. I thought they would look pretty good on camera with the final product. However, I was actually quite pleased with my final result once I kind of got my technique going, and I regretted not filming the first part of it as it's kind of the whole crucial step. So you want to start off with a little bit of a smudge, and I took my smudges in the direction of the outside of the saucer because I imagine that Han is getting shot at as he's flying away. So any kind of soot or anything that's being brought up by these blaster marks, any kind of burns or scorches, are immediately getting pulled down and away by the wind. So that's why I kind of oriented those blaster marks the way that I did. I then used a black dot right in the middle of where I wanted my blaster mark to end up to kind of use as a way to line up where I'm going to put these light star patterns. Now these aren't perfect stars, they're just kind of hash marks running right through the middle spot of where that blaster mark's going to be. I'm using an artist's Q-tip, but I've also seen them labeled as all kinds of things from like airbrush cleaners to whatever. So I will put a link to where I can find some on Amazon for you guys in the description below for anyone who wants to pick some up. But you can see I'm just kind of making all these little hash marks through the center point of where I want my blaster marks to be. And then on ones that are like way too big, I actually just take a wet brush with some water in it and very lightly kind of buff that area, and I'm able to shrink it down to an appropriate size. So then I mixed up some gray to kind of look maybe like primer or maybe the paint underneath of it, and we're just going to put a little bit of a teardrop shape right in the middle of where the blaster mark's going to be. It seems like a lot of the Star Wars ships, when they painted blaster marks on them, had this same little teardrop shape right in the middle. The difference being is that the teardrop, like the sharp side of the teardrop, is actually kind of scraggly and it's not perfectly straight. So if you kind of want to trail it off like it's got a little bit of a tail, you kind of can. Just understand that that tail is going in the same direction that the blaster bolt would be moving, and so you're creating what is essentially the illusion of a small divot on the surface of the armor by doing this. So before I switch back to the Tamiya weathering pigments, I wanted to show you that chalk pastel and rubbing alcohol does work, but you do have to use multiple layers and you do have to build this up over time. And by doing it this way, you can reactivate the previous layers if you're not sealing it in between every single layer. So just understand that if you go the chalk pastel route, you are going to have to build up multiple layers, or you're going to have to just cake it on loose without using rubbing alcohol and then lock it down using a spray-on finish, meaning a matte coat or something like that. Now if you are going to do it that way, you are going to have to spray from a distance, as if you spray from too close, you're just going to blow it all back off again. The one good advantage that using the chalk pastel has over using the Tamiya weathering pigments or most other brands of weathering pigments is how soft of a color you can do. So you can do these really light streaks like you see me doing here, and you don't have to be super careful or even dry brushing with a sponge applicator like you do with the Tamiya ones. Trying to dry brush with those sponges can be really difficult, but if you can figure it out, you can do some really awesome fades with it. So here I've switched over to the Tamiya weathering pigments ground colors. Now this comes with 2 sandy colors and a dirt color. I'm actually going to be using all 3 of these across the model in various places. However, I am focusing the dirt color mostly in the places where the landing gear are, and I'm going to also focus that around the door. And I'm going to use the sandy colors to kind of streak around all the places where my armor panels are kind of lacking and don't have much color or much things going on with them. And that's what's going to give me that streakiness that we see when we look at a lot of photos of the Millennium Falcon. Now I do very lightly use the metallics here to just pick out some of the pipes, as it is really easy. It's a nice thick pigment paint essentially when I mix it with a little bit of water, and it allows me to just kind of knock some color on. But you could use any metallic paints of your choice, silvers, grays, coppers, you could use blues, whatever color you really want. And this is just to kind of add a little bit of variety, just something so that when you're looking at it you realize that they are different colors, they're not just all the same color. Now once again, just like before, I'm going to go ahead and let this play out in 4x speed so you can see my process and see how I build these colors up. I also go back in with the Tamiya weathering pigments and the soot color and really block in that black around the vents on the back of the Millennium Falcon and really get it looking nice and dark. One of the last things I wanted to do with the engine compartment before calling it quits for this episode was to go ahead and put a dark blue dry brush in and around that area. I wanted to do this so that if I got the camera angle right, or if someone was picking it up and looking at it, I wanted it to look as though it were on, but not necessarily going full blast, which is why we're not going back in with a brighter blue and really highlighting the crap out of it. I just wanted to faint engine glow, as though the engine was on, but more and less in an idle position. And I feel like this did the job. The trick here was making sure that I got a nice dry brush on the inside and outside lip. Now, if I had split the Millennium Falcon back apart again, this would have been a lot easier, but I wanted to show how I would do it in case you guys glued yours together and weren't sure how to get in between that crack. And so basically, like I said before, guys, I am going to be doing the interior of the cockpit as its own video, and I'm going to be including all the little accessories that we didn't see in this video. I'm going to go ahead and weather and paint those up in next week's video. Again, the cockpit was specifically requested to be its own video with as few cuts in it as possible, so I think it will make a pretty good video all on its own. Although it may be a little short, I think it'll still be a nice video. So without further ado, this is where we are at. This is with it in its current form. I haven't gone in on any of the windows and added any of the paint to the windows, so I'm not including the canopies except for the main canopy on the cockpit. But yes, this is where we are. Hope you guys have enjoyed this week's video. I'm sorry I didn't get a video up in time last week. However, like I said, I wanted to start putting out some longer format videos and hopefully kind of bump the quality up a little bit, cover some more material, show some more examples, and I hope you guys will appreciate this push to try to do it this way and get you guys some more content to view. I know I was trying to cram a lot of information into a pretty short video previously, and as a result, a lot of the time maybe my actions on screen were not quite lining up with what I was trying to explain and may have been a bit confusing for some of you, and I apologize. In any case, may your display case always be filled and your pile of shame never run empty. Until next time.